Okay, call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Everyone hear me okay? Roll call, everyone is here. Let's take a look at the December 1st meeting minutes, please. Hold on one sec. Hold on one second before I take a motion. Dick, did you notice something?
I got one correction in here, and that was the county budget was up by 1.11%. The 1.74 was what just the Waldo part of the budget was. The jails, when jails are added in, it drops the percentage down to 1.11%.
Okay, where is that on here?
I'm looking for it while I'm talking to you.
Very last paragraph?
Second to last paragraph on the back.
Okay. Okay, so what should it say?
It should say has a 1.11% increase.
1.11. Okay, not 1.74.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as amended? Okay. Thank you, Meredith. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Thank you, Dick. Discussion? Questions? All those in favor of that? 5-0. Acceptance of agenda. We have at least one 11th hour item, right, James?
Yeah, there's an 11th hour item to discuss a problem with the furnace at the library.
Is that it? Okay, and we have executive session? Okay. I'll make a motion that we accept the agenda as amended.
Second.
Thank you, Dick. Discussion on that? All those in favor? 5-0 again. All right, public hearing, junkyard permit. Is there a motion? I'll make a motion that we exit regular session into public hearing at 7:03. Thank you. All those in favor of that? Public hearing for a junkyard permit renewal, Grimmel Industries. James, can you pass that application around? All right, James, I'll start. Any issues from the town's perspective as far as any enforcement or violations or anything like that?
I'm not aware of any. I did have the code enforcement officer write a report for you. You all should have got a copy of it. He actually did an inspection of the site last week, and I've included photographs that he took down there and his complete report. That's all I have.
Okay. So the board had a chance to take a look at that. I'll read it into the record, but okay. All right, open to the public on regarding the renewal for the junkyard permit.
You're not going to read the report first?
I can do that first if you want me to.
Well, just so you know what you're saying.
All right. So it says,
I had just asked that he read the report first into the record before we have open to the public.
so this is a letter from Randy Hall, code enforcement, dated December 15th. On December 1st, I visited the site where Grimmel Industries have set up operations at the Sprague Energy facility. I met with Mike Garrity, who is a foreman on site, and he showed me how the operation works. Prior to speaking with Mr. Garrity, I sat at a distance from the Grimmel site, still within the Sprague yard, and was able to see and hear the operation. As I observed the operation, trucks were being unloaded. While speaking with Mr. Garrity at the yard, 2 trucks came in to be offloaded with metals. One of the trucks was a dump trailer, and the other was unloaded by a crane with a magnetic head on it. During both of these times, there was no excessive noise caused by the offloading of either vehicle. The yard area around the metal piles is kept clean. Each time that a truck came in and had left the site, the crane operator cleaned up any loose metal from around the base of the piles, placing it on the pile itself. In my assessment of the site, I was satisfied that they were doing a good job and that the yard was being run quite efficiently. I was informed that they have been receiving metal since around October. I have not had any complaints addressed to me at this time in regards to any phase of this operation. There have been some reports of load noses from the port area, to which I spoke with Peter Fogg, who is operations manager for Spray, concerning the sound of load noises. Mr. Fogg let me know that he had not heard any unusual noises. He also checked with his night foreman, who also said there had not been any loud noises during the night shift. Grimmel does not operate at night. Their hours are from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Also spoke with the gate guard. He said there have been no complaints about any debris or metal left from the offloaded trucks leaving the site. Have also not had any complaints from the general public in regards to this operation on the site. Signed, Randolph B. Hall. Okay, thoughts on the public on this application? Is there a representative from Grimmel here? Okay, all right. Any point you want to speak, or if there's any questions? Okay. Come on up.
I understand, Phyllis Summer, Searsport. I understand that the Ordinance Review Committee has approved adoption of the current state junkyard ordinance because it is stricter than the one we now currently have, and therefore the state supersedes ours, and that this would be confirmed by voters at the town meeting. There are aspects of our ordinance that may be particularly reflective of Searsport's needs, and there may be additions we need to consider folding into the final product. So I'm asking the board to direct a further review of both of the state's ordinance and ours, preferably before town meeting, to ensure that the resulting ordinance is both relevant and effective and inclusive. And if you would consider that and possibly give a response to that request at your next meeting, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Any other thoughts from the public? Before I turn to Grimmel, at any point you want to jump in? Coming up.
My name's Harlan McLaughlin, and I live up back. I think something that needs to be considered by you folks before you approve this application is this. There's a junk pile down in southern Maine near Portsmouth that was run by these folks. And it turned out in court, EPA discovered that in some runoff water that they used to hose down their pile, there were some chemicals and things in that water that never should have been on the waterfront to begin with, never should have been in the junk pile to begin with. Mercury, PCBs, other things like that. Now, if they're using the same process, producing the same piles, washing it down the same way, a layman would think probably going to get the same result, same stuff in the water. So I would think that before you want to go ahead and say, yeah, sure, come on down, even though they're already here, I would think you'd want to consider that these things that are proven to be in their pile, unless they got a way to show you that they've changed their practices, they're going to still be there. These things are not allowed in junkyard on the seacoast. You can't have it. So knowing that it's there, and these not Dr. Seuss that found these findings. This is the EPA that came up with this and said, hey, these are there. So that's a fact. The EPA is the governing agency for all of us. I don't see how you can disregard their findings. So my feeling is, unless they can show you how it's going to be different now, you can't have that stuff on our waterfront. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Harlan. Any other further comments from the public? Coming up.
Jay Economy, Searsport resident. In the report that Randy Hall made to the board, he referenced a night shift. Could you or could they elaborate on what the night shift consists of? Because when they were approved, my understanding that their hours of operation were going to be ending at the end of the day and not going into the night. So if there's a night shift, I'd like to have a better explanation and understanding of what that consists of.
Do you want to answer that, or is that a security? Is that security, night shift? Go on.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Brian Rayback. I'm with Pierce Atwood. I'm here on behalf of Grimmel, the applicant. Grimmel doesn't operate at night, so I don't know what that reference was to. There are no operations on our part happening in the evening, so I'm unsure how to elaborate on that for the board. I would also clarify the prior speaker's comment that EPA had, and I may get his statement a little bit wrong here, had determined in court that there had been violations. That is not accurate. EPA did issue a notice of violation. It's called for a site down in Portsmouth. We spent a lot of time talking about that in front of the planning board when we got the planning board approval for this project. And I think we pretty clearly explained there that we have a very different view of that. Grimmel did settle those allegations so that it could keep its business moving forward. We didn't, it was very clear in the settlement with EPA that there was no admission of liability. In fact, had we pressed it, Grimmel would have objected strenuously to those claims. And so we have a very different view of what happened there. What's happening here is different. The permit that we have issued for this site is from the Maine DEP. It is a Maine multi-sector general permit that allows the discharge of industrial stormwater. Initially, we had thought that we could discharge stormwater via Sprague's stormwater permit for the site. EPA preferred that we get our own permit, so we did that.
You're talking about EPA, you're talking about the federal agency or DEP, the state agency?
Yeah, well, EPA did opine to DEP. They said, we want Grimmel to go and get their own permit. And so that's what we did in conjunction with the DEP. The standards that were adopted in that permit voluntarily by Grimmel are much more stringent than the standards that applied down in Portsmouth, because what we did was we voluntarily adopted what were then only proposed standards for scrapyards. They hadn't yet been through the final process of rulemaking. And in fact, that is still true. Those are still not the standards that apply to scrapyards in Maine. We voluntarily took more stringent levels because we knew we could meet them. And in fact, our stormwater results from earlier this month, after we started operating, as the code enforcement officer said, in October, I believe. So our stormwater results, which are taken quarterly for December, show that we're meeting every single benchmark that is in our permit. And so the stormwater is clean. This site is being run effectively, and the problems, whatever you think of them, whatever interpretation you have of them from what happened in Portsmouth, those problems are not happening here. This is a very different site. It's a very different situation. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Please.
You said that you've been testing the stormwater. Where do you take the samples that are tested? Is that from the outfall from the settlement pond, or is it water coming into the settlement pond? Where are you testing?
You take it before it discharges into the water body. I believe physically it's after there's the settlement pond, then there's that settlement pond drains into another smaller pond area. I believe you've been to the site, ma'am, so you may know what I'm talking about. And I think they take the discharge from the back end of that pond. The idea is to take the discharge after it goes through the settling process. That's what those ponds are designed to do, is to allow the solids to settle out so that they are not in the stormwater any longer. And a lot of what we're talking about with stormwater is solids. It's sediment and the like. And so they get the discharge before it goes into the water body, but after it goes through treatment.
So I'm trying to imagine where those samples are taken. I saw the larger settlement pond, which the storage pad drains into, and then there's a sort of a little drain that goes off to the side, and there is a very small place there lined with rock. Is that what you're considering the second settlement pond? Oh, down by the water. I did not see that then.
Okay.
And that's where you've
So
been
it's
taking the
taken at,
samples.
yes. So this is Mike Garrity from Grimmel with me tonight. He said, for those at home, that the sample is taken right at the outfall before it goes into the river, which is all the way down at the end of the property there before it goes into the river.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further thoughts from the public? Peter?
Peter Tabor, Pike Avenue. I want to remind the Board of Selectmen that on January 7th of this year, Mr. Garrity, representing this Grimmel Industries, was asked if there'd been any problem in the past in Portsmouth. And what he said was no. Now, I was present at that meeting, and I brought up some things that were reported in the local papers down in Portsmouth. And he said, oh, no, it was all negotiated down. Well, if the papers are to be believed, yes, it was negotiated down. A fine that was originally nearly $500,000 was negotiated down to $75,000, with about twice that amount to be used for good deeds. I think they were environmental cleanup. It had to do with improving oyster bed habitat. I think that I cannot see that that was anything but a flat lie to, and I use that word quite consciously to you, that you were lied to, and in order that this company could get its original junkyard permit. Be that as it may, if you want to forgive them for that, I want to ask you if perhaps you should be getting some kind of guarantee, because 2.5 years before that, in 2012, Mr. Grimmel I referred to, his son, Tim Grimmel, not Grimmel, what's his name? Garrity. His son, at that point, they were collecting the stormwater and into tank trucks to take it away, presumably not to be dribbled on the road on the way out somewhere, but taken to a legitimate dump. However, this same Tim Garrity was filmed by the harbor master in Portsmouth hooking up a hose to a tank truck on the pier, putting the hose over the side and dumping it right into the Piscataqua River. And I believe that man is facing prison time for his misdeeds. I think, we have to look at the record of these people. It's not illegitimate to look at how have they performed. It's the same cast of characters running this operation. I'd like to know, however they collect this stuff, is it essentially going to be quietly some night dumped over the side? How do we know? How are we protected from this? And this issue is further complicated by the fact that we have a big dredging project coming up. Now, I can tell you that when you grind up an automobile, you release mercury. And the reason for that is there are these gravity-operated mercury switches in the trunk and in the hood of the car. And they're supposed to be taken out, and they generally take them out of the trunk and the hood. Now, I speak with some knowledge about this because my son worked for a rival company, and it's very well known in the industry that, yes, you can take the mercury switch from the trunk and from the hood, but there are also braking systems that work upon centrifugal mercury switch, and they're very difficult to get at, and sometimes there are other ones as well. Now, modern cars in the last few years do not have this problem, but cars 10, 15, 20 years old, which are the ones that are getting ground up, they do. And the fact is, to cut costs, they do not dismantle. My son, told me again and again, nobody gets into the guts of the car to get down into the braking systems to get these out. Don't believe me, don't believe my son. I think at least you should owe it to the town to investigate this, because there's no question in my mind they put mercury in the past, and I've seen this gentleman, this lawyer, standing up in front of the planning board and saying, oh, the mercury, it comes out of the sky from Midwestern coal plants. And he did it so convincingly that at the next meeting I watched Bruce Probert saying, oh, the mercury, and he went through the same pantomime. That's how persuasive this gentleman is. I think you owe it to the town to do due diligence and find out, one, is mercury produced in these piles of scraps? I personally assure you that mercury ends up in it? And two, how does this affect adding more mercury in a contested area, right now contested over the matter of dredging, and what kind of dredging spoils are going to end up perhaps drifting down into perhaps the richest lobster fishing grounds in the world? These are very, very important issues. It's very complex. And an assurance from somebody whose son apparently seems to be on his way to prison for pulling a fast one it bears getting certain kinds of assurances. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Peter. Anybody else? I saw you before. Go ahead.
Janet Williams, Searsport. I would like to ask, you talk about the water being clean and going off into the bay or wherever it goes. What about all these sediments that are sinking down into the pond? What do you do with those? How are those dealt with?
Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure. With respect to the sediments, periodically that pond is dredged, and then the sediments are tested to see what's in them, and then they are handled according to that test result. So if it turns out that there are heavy metals and things like that that need to be managed appropriately, it's treated as hazardous waste or special waste, and it's taken to a secure landfill. So that process gets those sediments out of the stormwater. That's how detention systems are designed to function. I'm glad to hear that some people were listening when we talked about mercury in front of the planning board. I'm not always sure. All I can tell you about the mercury issue is that our December 2nd sample of mercury showed that mercury in our stormwater discharge was non-detect. The level of detection, meaning the level at which the test, how far down the test goes, is 0.0002. So it's getting quite low, and mercury is a serious issue, there's no doubt about it, but the systems that are in place right now are effectively handling that mercury issue.
Further thoughts from the public? Hold on a second. Anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Okay. Do you want to speak? Go on.
Ted Kessler. I live on Navy Street in Searsport. The results that you've received, as I recall from the planning board hearing, there was talk about establishing some sort of benchmark. And at that time, I guess it was decided that that was impossible because it's part the mercury from the sky and so on. So I'm asking perhaps that these results that you've received now could be established as a benchmark, and those results be given to the board and put in that file and be made available to anyone who wants to see those. So when they come before this body again, perhaps, you can get further results and keep a record based on this benchmark that apparently has been established. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, further thoughts from the public? If you've spoken before, that's okay. Just keep it brief, okay?
Basically, I just have a question. I was wondering if it would be advisable for the board to occasionally employ independent testers of the water that's being drained. I understand that Grimmel does its own testing, and this might be an assurance for the townspeople of the purity of the water and the legitimacy of the testing. Thank you.
Just to clarify, does Grimmel do its own testing or does DEP do the testing? If you could clarify that issue, please.
We take the samples, but we don't do the testing. We take the samples to the lab.
Right, in case you can't hear Mike, he says, we take the sample, but we don't do the testing. A lab does the testing. And the samples these are the kinds of samples that people all around the state, regular business owners, take these samples. It's not that complicated a system to take the sample. The test work is very sophisticated, and that's done by specialized certified labs. But
the
there are
result-
people in junkyards and paper mills and, sawmills and all kinds of industrial facilities all around the state who can take samples.
And what is your understanding of the results of this testing? Is it something that's matter of public record through DEP, or what's your understanding?
Well, it's not now a matter of public record. At the end of the year, we submit, as part of this permit that we have through the DEP, they'll be submitting an annual report to the DEP. That information is a public record, and it's available to anyone who wants to see it. I'm sure that as part of that process, we could provide that to the town, if that were important to this board.
So does this annual report include testing results from the lab, or?
It does include results of the sampling, yes, it does. So if that needs to be done, that could be done. I'm not entirely sure where to locate that in what I understand is the town's ordinance on regulations of junkyards. The performance standards don't deal with, for example, stormwater, the way the planning board's standards deal with stormwater. And so one issue is that we would ask that if we're going to impose conditions on this approval, it would be helpful to know what's the basis for that condition in the ordinance for junkyards, because I haven't been able to find that yet.
James, do we have the current permit? Because I know when we originally granted this, I think it was this past March, we did grant it with some conditions, and I think one of them was hours of operation, and I think the other one was that all DEP permits are in place. I'm trying to rack my brain as to if there's any other conditions. The DEP permit was a condition we imposed. The hours of operation was agreed upon. I don't know if there's any others. Does any other member of the board remember any other conditions besides that?
And I don't mean to be difficult about that. It's simply that we went through a very lengthy process in front of the planning board, and the planning board has quite a bit in its ordinances about all kinds of issues: stormwater, air, lighting, traffic. There's all kinds of very specific standards in those ordinances that applied, and we met those standards. And we've only been in operation for about, 2.5 months now. So there's not, and as far as we're aware, there have not been complaints. We've talked with Sprague, who's our landlord. They have not heard any complaints. We understand from the code enforcement officer that we're doing a good job with compliance. And so part of our issue here is just making sure that we're being treated the same way that other similar junkyards are being treated. Reasonable accommodations about hours of operations and providing you reports, we're happy to do that. We just want to make sure that we don't get carried away into areas that are not specifically set out in your ordinance. I understand you're talking about amending that ordinance to add different provisions from maybe a model state ordinance, but I don't think you have those in place now.
No, and the ordinance we have now is not very different from the state ordinance at all.
Okay.
All right, further thoughts on the public? Laura?
Laura Donnelly on Bowen Road. When you purchase a home in Maine, there are certain water quality tests that if you want them done, the sample must be collected by a licensed third party because the health implications of tampering with the sample are too important to leave it to the buyer or the seller alone. It seems wholly reasonable to request that this sample also be collected by a third party that does not have a financial interest in the outcome of the tests.
When you take samples, is that done pursuant to DEP regulations?
Yes, this is not our decision. This is the DEP program. We're simply following the permit.
Other thoughts on the public? Harlan, quick. No, you weren't. I'm just kidding.
Longer to get up here than it takes to say what I have to say.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'm concerned about the testing that's going to be made public, and I'm wondering if that testing is going to include the sediments in the bottom of the pond. I hope it does. I think mercury probably would sink. I don't know. My experience was. I want to make clear that what we're concerned with is that the piles that we have on our shores right now do not contain the same chemicals that this gentleman is going to jail for dumping in the river. Whatever they are, however they caught him, whenever it was done, the guy had stuff that he wasn't supposed to have, and he was doing things he wasn't supposed to do with it. How can we be sure that our piles don't contain the same stuff that he was trying to dump in the river? That's my question. That was quick, right?
Thank you.
That's quick, yeah.
Any other thoughts before we close the public hearing? Steve?
Are they not going to respond to that comment?
It's up to them. Steve, you have the floor.
I had one quick question, Brian. Understand that from Sears Island up to Bucksport, we have the most mercury-laden part of the river and body of water in the state. So there are a lot of concerns. My question, Brian, is, are you required to test for mercury or PCBs in the overflow discharge, the water that's discharged? Is there, because the environmental engineer for Sprague said they were not required to for their overwater discharge, and that when the pond fills, we asked where it went, and he said it goes into the ocean. So every time it fills, it dumps into the ocean. There's no place for it to go. So if you could answer that question, please.
Sure. So two aspects of that. One is, yes, we test for PCBs and we test for mercury. That's part of this DEP permit that I was telling you about. The other part is, to be clear, the way that stormwater pond works is it's designed to overflow so that what happens is you get the sediments falling out in the pond. There's a gooseneck pipe at the top of the pond, so as the pond fills up, the top layer, the upper elevations of the water body in that pond can flow out just like any other stormwater pond and end up flowing down into the harbor, into the river. But the whole reason behind the detention pond is to get those solids to settle out. Those do not overflow and flow into the river. Those are dredged up periodically. It depends on how quickly they fill, how often that has to be done. But that material is dredged and then it's managed appropriately.
All right, any other thoughts of the public before we make a
Did
decision?
I answer your question, sir?
Laura?
What about my question?
Did you have a, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that you had a question.
My question was, how can we be sure that our pile doesn't contain
Okay.
the same elements that pile did when he got dumped and was trying to...
Gotcha. So the process in Portsmouth, as I said, the Portsmouth site was a very different site. The process in Portsmouth involved spraying water on the piles to control dust. And that was the water that ran off the piles. And all that was being sprayed on the piles, by the way, was drinking water. But that water was collected in a tanker truck and then recirculated, and it was sprayed again. That's the material that this gentleman is talking about. That system is not in place here. We have best management practices through Sprague and their air license. We talked a lot about this at the planning board hearing as well. They'll be doing opacity monitoring to make sure that there's not too much dust in the air. We don't believe dust is going to leave the site. We haven't heard any complaints about dust being an issue at all so far. And so, again, very different site. We're not doing that activity. The material itself is still, it's ferrous scrap. There's nothing particularly unusual about that. It's the same kind of scrap that you find in scrap yards all over Maine.
Hold on a second, Harlan. You've spoken twice. Thank you. Jay, why don't you come up briefly?
Well, my recollection at the hearings before the planning board and the town selectmen was that they would use that spraying of the pile to keep down dust if that became a problem.
Yes, if it becomes a problem, we would, but it would be a different system.
And how so?
We would pull out of the top of that.
Would you mind just going to the microphone so you can...
I'm sorry.
Go on. It's all right.
It would be a different system. If we need to, we did say in that planning board process that we would spray the piles. Like I say, it hasn't been a problem yet, and so we're not expecting that we'll have to do this. But if we need to, we will set up a system that avoids that problem. We haven't engineered that yet, but the preliminary discussion was that you could take water off of the top of that detention pond and spray that on the piles and have it run back into the detention pond. So you could avoid the sediments, is the idea there. So yes, it's possible that we could end up spraying these piles, but we don't think we're going to need to do that, and so far it hasn't been a problem.
All right, any final thoughts in the public hearing? Briefly, please.
2 points. One, in the overflow system that you described, I would imagine that a certain amount of time needs to pass in order for the sediments to settle. So what do you do? What happens in a situation where you have excessive rain over a prolonged period of time? It is flushing a lot of water through the overflow ponds very quickly and perhaps not leaving the sediments enough time to settle out before the water overflows. And my second question is, or comment is, I don't find it particularly reassuring of we don't think dust is going to be an issue and no one's complained about it yet. I would like to have a little bit more of an assurance that there is some monitoring happening, that you are being proactive about that and not waiting for the townspeople to complain before you do something about it.
Thank you. I was not clear enough on the dust issue. I'll start with that one first. We committed as part of that planning board process that if there are problems, we will spray. That's part of our approval from the planning board. So it is not simply our assurance, it's a permitting criterion that if there are problems with dust, we have to control the dust. The assurance is not just, it's not us, it's really Sprague that's monitoring that. They do that, it's a material handling site. They monitor dust from all of the loading and unloading operations that happen at that facility. And they do it through a process that people call sort of, they call it casually going to smoke school. So you learn how to read the smoke out of a smokestack. But they have people who are certified by the Maine DEP who go to smoke school to get this certification, and they can measure the opacity and determine if there's a problem or not. So it's not casual. I didn't mean to make it sound casual. It's a serious commitment from the company, and it's backed up by DEP oversight and Sprague's operating practices as well. The other question that she asked was, what do you do if there's a really big rainstorm? I'm not an engineer, and I don't have the engineering for that detention pond, but it was designed to handle very large rainstorms. And so it's designed to handle exactly the situation that she's talking about. Exactly which storm it was designed to handle, was it designed to handle bigger storms in light of climate change? I don't know the answer to that. We're working on a system that was designed by engineers that designed the site for Sprague. And so far, we haven't been anywhere close to the top. We also understand from talking with Sprague as we were looking at this site that anecdotally at least, that they did not have problems with that detention pond overflowing because of large storm events. It's quite large and it can handle quite a volume of water.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, the other things that I should mention is we focus so much on the detention pond. The nature of the DEP permit here is also such that it does not rely solely on the detention pond at the end of the system. Good stormwater management doesn't start just at like a filter on a pipe. You don't start at the end of the process. You actually start at the beginning of the process. So an awful lot of good stormwater management is all the sweeping and the maintenance of the piles that goes on a regular basis. The code enforcement officer mentioned in his report, for example, that they were cleaning up as they went. The reason they do that is because of stormwater regulations. They need to clean up all the time to keep dust down, to keep little bits of metal from wandering around the site. If they don't do that, they're not in compliance with their DEP permit. So that's a very big part of this process as well. We've been talking about the sediment ponds so much, I didn't want to lose sight of the fact that they're doing things sort of upstream, so to speak, to make sure that we don't have problems in the first place.
Thank you. Harlan, I'm not calling on you 3 times. I'm not talking to you, Peter. I'm talking to Harlan. Harlan, is there anybody else that wants to say anything? really brief.
I'm kind of old, and I have a hard time understanding these things, and
I don't believe that for a split second.
I have to have it
Go
made
ahead.
really clear, really honestly. Now, picture this with me. We have a pile of stuff. It's down south, and they spray it, okay? Picture in your mind, they're spraying it, and they're catching the water, and they're taking it away in a truck, and they're getting caught, and that water has stuff in it that's not good, okay? Now, picture here, I'm having a hard time to understand how it's different, whether it's a different system, I understand that, but whether it's a system where they spray it and collect the water, or it rains and they collect the water, how does that change what's in the water, and how is what's in the water going to be different than what's in the water the guy's going to jail for? I don't understand how that, I just don't understand. Can somebody please break it down real simple for me, please?
I mean, I'm gonna try to explain it, and you tell me if I get this wrong. But it sounds like there's no, what you would do if, in the event that you need to do this, would not be putting it in tanker trucks. And recycling it would be to attempt to use the surface of the water of the overflows or the retention ponds and doing it that way. Is that correct?
Right, although, to be clear, that system has not been designed.
Right.
Yet. We haven't designed that system because we haven't needed it. But that's the preliminary idea.
Okay, so the dirty water would be recycled back.
Aaron, the point I was trying to make is not how the stuff would be recycled, but what's in it. How would what's in it be different than what's in it there? What's in it's what the problem is. They're not supposed to have that stuff in there. They don't have a permit for mercury, they don't have a permit for any of those things.
I guess I'm just as thick as you are, Harlan. Is there
found
anybody
it.
else
They
that...
found it in the water. How is their pile different from this pile? It's just a basic, easy question to answer.
It's clearly not.
Some answers? That's all.
Jay?
I don't understand why they don't have a system in place now, knowing that it happened in Portsmouth, and knowing that they got the same kind of pile here, that it's going to rain, they're going to spray it because dust will be, I mean, you haven't gotten into the hot season, the summer season, you started in October. I mean, you can anticipate that they're going to have a problem. Why don't they have a system in place now designed to address that issue? I mean, that's like, they had it before. This is a, like a business that's been in place. Why don't they have that system in place now? Why don't they?
Yep.
We don't have the system in place now because we haven't needed to have the system in place now. It is not a difficult system to put into place if we decide we need to do it, okay? These are not sophisticated, this is not going to be some kind of sophisticated engineering calculus to put this thing together. It can be done very quickly. The reason, well, a couple things. I mentioned earlier that the situation in Portsmouth was very different. That site was literally right across the street from a condominium complex. So it was a very sensitive neighborhood. And there were some people who didn't much care for Grimmel's operation, to be candid. Some people in Portsmouth questioned whether it made any sense at all to have a materials handling facility in close proximity to the downtown, like they did there. This is a very different site. We're in the middle of a very large material, bulk material handling site. In fact, not even in the middle. We're quite a bit, we're closer to the dock. And so we are shielded by quite a bit of other infrastructure in the area. It's also a very large parcel. And so, again, we think it's reasonable to believe that dust is not a problem and will not be a problem. And again, we think it's reasonable to distinguish between what happened in Portsmouth and what's happening here. The data speaks for itself. You're wondering, well, how could it be that we're meeting standards here, but we didn't meet standards in Portsmouth? Again, very different site. After we left Portsmouth, we continued to get copies of the data that the landlord, who is the state of New Hampshire, they had to continue to sample their own stormwater discharge because they run a port facility there. And in fact, their data after we left showed that the stormwater got worse, not better. I think that says an awful lot about what was going on at the site. I think it shows that we were doing our best, and we were doing actually a good job. It was not perfect, but we were doing a good job of complying. And when we come up here, and every single one of our test results meets the DEP's benchmark standard. Now, we're going to have to keep proving that over and over. We can't do it once and then quit. Those are quarterly tests, and we're going to have to do that for as long as we have approval under this permit. And we are going to be inspected by the DEP, I guarantee it. So, again, very different site, and the results, I think, speak for themselves.
Thank you. Quickly.
I keep hearing from Mr. Rayback that if problems arise, then they'll do this and that. The question is, who's deciding if problems are arising? Just as who's deciding the taking of sampling? You know, it's, at that point, the crookedness is the potential enters the picture. And it would be perhaps very unfair if this is a company coming out of the blue and we don't know anything about it and they all seem nice and reasonable people, and you give them the benefit of the doubt. But why would you give them the benefit of the doubt when they have been indulging in outright criminal behavior? Let's say that again, criminal behavior. They're in violation of the Clean Water Act. They've been dumping poisonous substances into the waters of the United States. It's criminal. And apparently, while they were picked up in this one isolated case, why should it have been isolated? And I might point out that although this same Tim Garrity, who apparently is going to prison over this illegal dumping, was also involved in the head of the Longshoremen's Union in Portsmouth, came out on the pier one day and he found a tombstone cut out of scrap iron with his initials on it, and rest in peace. Now the same Tim Garrity, they couldn't get enough to actually convict him, but when there's smoke, there's fire, and the fact is, this Tim Garrity was charged with terrorizing, and 3 or 4 days later, this same longshoreman, who'd been apparently the object of enmity from this company, somebody went by his house and opened fire and shot up his car on the side of his house.
You know, Peter, when I said quickly, I meant it.
What? Well,
Please
I
wrap
think
up.
if I'm bringing out a case of attempted murder, that it might be worthwhile
Okay, Peter,
paying
you're done.
attention.
You're done.
Have you heard that?
Yep.
That's all I care
I'm
about.
going to make a motion, we close the
absorb
public hearing
that.
at this point at 7:50.
Second.
Discussion from the board. All those in favor? 5-0. All right, discussion from public hearing. James, is this application any different from, is it straight renewal or is there anything?
Straight renewal, no changes.
So, we received no reports of violations of code enforcement officer. It's a straight renewal, and I've heard no evidence of any violations or problems. So I'll make a motion that we renew the permit with the same conditions. All right, there's a second. Discussion.
Yes, I have something to say. There's been a lot of very hot rhetoric. The first thing, I remember the initial hearing when Grimmel first came here and asked for a permit to have their junkyard at Mac Point. And there were a lot of things that people were concerned about. They were concerned about noise, about scraps of metal falling on the road and causing flat tires and so on. And they have been operating down there for a number of months. And I think most people in town didn't even realize that they were operating yet because there was no noise that I heard any complaints about. And I didn't see any evidence of scrap metal on the roads was causing problems for people. And it seems to me that Grimmel is trying very hard to be a good neighbor here. And I thank them for that. They're doing a good job of that. And the code enforcement officer seems to agree. There is one issue that clearly is still of a great deal of concern to the people of the town. Their very charming lawyer said that he had looked at the ordinance and didn't find anything in there that that was relevant to the renewal of this permit. I think that it would be difficult for anything relevant to be in that ordinance because this ordinance was written thinking about somebody with 3 or 4 junk cars in their backyard selling the parts. This ordinance wasn't written or conceived with any idea of something of the size and complexity of Grimmel coming to our town. And so we were maybe caught with our ordinance's pants down. But the intent of the ordinance in the very first line, when it says, the purpose of this ordinance is to provide adequate controls to ensure that the existence of automobile graveyards and junkyards and recycling businesses does not have a deleterious effect on the town's health, safety, environment, and general welfare. And if we didn't put language in the ordinance that really addressed that, it's because, as I say, nobody had any idea that anything of the size of Grimmel would ever come to Searsport. But the intent of the ordinance is pretty obvious there, that we are trying to protect our town from harmful things coming to us. And in this spirit, I think it's unfortunate to dredge up problems or alleged problems from Grimmel's past, what things that happened or alleged to have happened in Portsmouth. But the reports of these things have concerned a lot of people, and it seems to me that there is a very simple and fair and untroubling way to deal with all of this so that everybody gets what they want. Grimmel can go on operating, the people of Searsport can have reassurance, and that would be simply for Grimmel to agree that independent testing can be done by the town. We have apparently, according to the state statute, municipal officers have the right to go down there and look and see that everything is being operated okay. That we take samples and have them independently analyzed to make sure that the outfall into the bay does not contain anything harmful. This will reassure people here who are concerned about the water that was, the water that was coming out of that tank truck and was allegedly being illegally dumped into the Piscataqua River, was tested for the court case. I don't know who did the testing, if it was the state or if it was the attorneys or who did it, but the water in the truck was tested and found to contain mercury and aluminum and lead and PCBs and all sorts of things. I think it would certainly not cost Grimmel a penny, and it would allow the people of Searsport to be reassured that the water that's going into our bay is safe. If we arranged, and I don't know if this even needs to go into the permit, but to agree that if independent testing finds that there's nothing harmful going into the bay from your retention ponds, we can all shake hands and sing kumbaya. There's nothing wrong there. But nobody is going to be happy unless there is independent testing done so that we are sure that the town and the environment here is safe.
Thank you. The current motion on the floor is to renew the permit with the same conditions as before, which included at least hours of operation, as well as maintain compliance with their Department of Environmental Protection permit.
Can we include in the permit any language about independent testing?
I believe that's a condition that would have to be agreed to. I don't think you have any authority on that in that regard.
Would Grimmel agree to that? It's not going to cost you anything, and it would be simply testing. If you have nothing to hide, then there would be no reason at all to object to testing, the independent testing of the water coming out of the retention pond. And that would solve all these problems, and it wouldn't even cost any money. Well, maybe a little, but not much.
I think it's optimistic to suggest that would solve all the problems. I think there's quite a few people in this room that wouldn't be convinced no matter what the results were. It is not as simple as simply having somebody else come out and do testing. The program is set up to be tested by the facilities for a reason, and that is that you have to catch what's called the first flush of stormwater. And so you're trying to catch the beginning of a stormwater event, the beginning of a rain event. Somebody has to be there and ready to go in order to collect the sample when that first stormwater starts rolling off of the site. It's not as easy to do as you imagine, that you just, you send somebody over there any old time. You have to get into the facility, which is gated and guarded. I'm sure that could be worked out with Sprague in some way. But there are some logistical problems, and I've seen quite a few of our clients who have had trouble with that because they have tried to hire out to a third party that maybe had an office, 3 or 4 towns away, and they haven't been able to get there in time. You're supposed to get there right when it starts raining. And so what we're going to end up with, I'm afraid, is missed test results, bad data, and then there's going to be an argument about, well, our data is different from your data because we showed up 2 hours later than you did, and we get into an issue. This is what we were concerned about. One of the issues we raised in front of the planning board was, we're happy to do things that are reasonable, but to what end? What is the town going to do with this data? The town needs to have the ability to analyze it. The DEP has the ability to analyze it, and they do. So if the town requires us to do that, we will work with the town and we will make it happen. We're not real excited about volunteering to do it because I see, frankly, I'm not as optimistic as you are, with all due respect, that that's going to solve all the problems. I think it's going to create new problems, and I think we won't satisfy everybody.
Further discussion on the motion?
Could I ask the nice attorney a question about that? Do you think that doing nothing is going to solve this problem? Do you think that people are going to feel better about Brimmel's outfall if you have refused to participate in this? And the other thing is, too, the point of the testing is not to play a game to catch the first flush and all that. The point of the testing is to determine if contaminants are going into the bay. And if you take a test, it doesn't matter if it's whenever it is, if it shows that contaminants are going into the bay, it doesn't matter if it rained or not, contaminants are going into the bay, and that's what everybody is concerned about. I don't know why they want the first rush of stormwater. I guess they would catch the most recent, I don't know. But if the only testing is done of the first rush of stormwater after a rainstorm, there are an awful lot of things that could be going into the bay for many hours and many days that would miss the testing. What we're interested here is not catching Grimmel or playing gotcha or anything else. Just an honest question, what's going into our bay? That's
Sure.
Why would anybody not want to be cooperative about that?
I understand that, and I don't think you're playing a game either. There's nothing about this. You say doing nothing, is that going to help? We're not doing nothing. There's an awful lot going on. The stormwater pollution prevention plan for this site is about that thick, okay? There's a lot going on. And there's a lot of regulation at this site from the main DEP. There's not nothing. This is not being treated lightly. It's being taken very seriously. And I think so far, the results in town back that up. So when I say that, when you say we're not cooperating, or you suggest why wouldn't you cooperate, it's not a question of do we want, are we worried you're playing a game of gotcha? That's not what my concern is. My concern is that it's not as simple as you think it is, because I've been in this situation, not in this town, but in other situations, where you end up with 2 competing sets of test results, and then you start fighting about which test result is valid. And I've been in a lot of situations where very well-intentioned planning board members are looking at data that they don't quite know how to analyze. You need to have technical assistance to help you do that kind of stuff. That's where we got into this discussion about, mercury falling from the sky that we referred to earlier. There's a lot of complexity to this system, and I'm very worried that we engage part way. We take half measures, because that's, in my experience, where companies end up having problems, because there's miscommunication, there's misinterpretation, there are 2 different views of how to handle things. What we want to do is follow the rule that is in place from the Maine DEP. We want to follow that permit to the letter. It's definitely not doing nothing, it's doing quite a bit. We don't want to go beyond that, because as soon as you start doing that, you start changing the rules of the game, and I guarantee there will be disputes and problems going forward. So we think our results over time will back up what we're saying. So we think that what will solve the rancor in this town is by being a good corporate citizen, by doing what we're supposed to do, keeping the dust down, keeping the noise down, doing our stormwater testing. I think that that's the only way that we're going to be able to convince people that this is a good business and they ought to be part of your community. The only way we can do that is to take the steps that we need to do and be very workmanlike about it. And that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Dick, I saw your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah. I want no part of this town getting involved with any testing that can be done by an outside agency. We should not be the body that is involved in the testing. We may be going down a road that we're going to regret. I will not support paying for any organization. This is between the parties right there. And I think it's time to move the motion.
Yeah, there's a motion on the floor with a second. Further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, and just a reminder, it's a motion to approve the reapplication with identical conditions as the first time. All those in favor? Opposed? 4-1. Thank you. Item 8, open to the public, first round. Okay, move on to old business. There is a second session, and people can call in 548-6372. Old business liquor license reconsideration with the Mermaid. This is, if the board remembers, we were first meeting this month. The board voted to deny liquor license, and there was some concern about whether or not we could deny a liquor license, basically because of property tax issues. And I had James call MMA to get their official opinion on it. James, can you just kind of let us know what we found, and then we can decide what to do?
I did reach out. I did get an official answer from through Maine Municipal. The granting or denying of an application, the municipal officers shall indicate the reasons for their decision, and there are 6 actual points in which one could be denied, and I'll go through them real quickly. Conviction of any Class A, B, or C crime, non-compliance of licensed premises or its use in any local zoning ordinance or other land use ordinance not directly related to liquor control, conditions of record of such waste disposal violations, health or safety code violations, repeated parking violations are in the vicinity of the licensed premises and caused by persons patronizing or employed by the licensed premises, or other such conditions caused by persons patronizing or employed by the licensed premises that unreasonably disturb, interfere, or affect the ability of the persons or business residing located in the vicinity of the licensed premises to use their property in a reasonable manner. Repeated incidents of records of breach of the peace, disorderly conduct, vandalism, violation of law, or in the vicinity of the licensed premises, which cause persons patronizing or employed by the licensed premises a violation of any provision of the title. That would be the title for liquor. And the final one is determination by municipal county officers or commissioners that the purpose of the application is to circumvent the provisions of Section 601. And it clearly did not include anything with taxes, so it should be reconsidered.
Okay. In order to properly reconsider something, that the people who made the motion and seconded should be called upon to determine if they want to reconsider their decision in their second.
I made the motion.
Okay. So do you want to make any kind of motion at this point?
Do I repeal my motion
You
or
can
just
move to
approve the application?
Move to reconsider and approve.
I move to reconsider and approve the application.
And according to the minutes, I think, Jack, you seconded. Do you want to second that motion? Okay. I did recuse myself because I had represented the owners of the Mermaid in unrelated litigation in the past. I'll continue to recuse myself. Any further discussion?
I would also add that I did meet with the owner today.
Thank you.
And we do have I think, a solid plan in place that will move forward. They were thankful, actually, that it was brought forward because it brings it more in light in their corporation, and they will be dealing with it with us. A very pleasant conversation and a very good outcome. And they offered to be here tonight, but since we already worked it out, I told them there really wasn't a need to. We're in a good place.
Thank you for the update, James. I forgot about that. All right, discussion on the motion to reconsider and approve?
I'm happy to change my vote and reconsider that. I just find it odd that we can't use that, and I think the law ought to be changed, so.
So get on it, James.
I don't have a problem with doing that.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion on that? All right, all those in favor of the motion? Abstained, 401, please. To approve. New business, the issue of a town song and flag came up at the last meeting and asked to be put on the agenda. I forgot who brought it up. That sounds like a Jack thing. There. Yeah. So, is there? Dick brought up the song.
Who do you want to go first?
Well, I don't know. It's anyone. I mean, I have some thoughts on it, but anyone have any thoughts on how you want to handle this? Or personally, I think that the adults are too mature to handle an issue like this. So I think the fifth graders should do it. I think they'd have some fun with a flag and/or a song. That's just my thoughts.
Let me go first.
Go ahead.
Okay. My thoughts were that, you know, when I explained this, it started with a conversation with you about the flag. And then well, why not the town song? I happen to like the one that they use, Hello, no, not Hello, Dolly. Hello, Searsport, when they have their performances. And let's go for both of them and see what happens. Well, I've heard some possibly negative stuff by using the tune, Hello, Dolly. Karen and I just had a brief discussion. She said maybe we could write another one. I think that's probably, I'm not good at music, that we'd probably have to find 2 or 3 people that are into this. Karen, I would nominate you for one if you've got the time, and see if you can come up with a song. I really like the one that we have, but if we're going to run into legalities, I'm leery of going with it and then finding that we've got to change it. So that's what I'm looking for. Thought it was going to be a simple thing, but we've kind of dug up some things that we've got to address and get the right song out there. Go ahead.
Good, Jack.
So the concern is copyrights?
That's it, copyrights, yeah.
If you did it to the tune of Happy Birthday, it'd probably be okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, that's okay too.
I can't wrap myself around this copyright stuff on a song like Hello, Dolly, or Happy Birthday, or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and stuff like that. I mean, the music's going to stop if we can't
Right.
do something with
You
the
have to
tunes.
do something original.
But when the almighty dolly gets out there, things can happen, and we got to deal with it.
Well, could we have it the unofficial official song?
Yeah.
My advice would be to tackle one of these at a time, and maybe the simpler one is the flag. And my position is, I'm not in favor of committees or the adults handling it. Someone called me with their thoughts on the flag, and it felt really good to tell them that I really don't care what their ideas of the flag were, because I really think that's something that the fifth graders would really, I think, do a great job at. And then see how they do it and come up with some ideas and maybe pick one at town meeting. I think if we give them some basic criteria of what we're looking for and then they come up with some ideas, I think that's the best way to handle it. That's just my thought.
Would you let Karen?
Yeah, Karen, do you have a thought?
I don't don't know anything about copyright laws. The song was written by my mother in 1970 for the 125th anniversary of the town. And then she used it again. Well, the show that she put on was Hello Searsport. And then in 1995, it was Hello Searsport 2. And she used that song again. And then we started using it for our summer programs. Nobody's ever said anything to me about it being an issue. And I mean, obviously, I was quite honored when Dick called me because my mother's been a very important part of this town, and I felt it was quite a tribute to her to be able to use something like this that she just loved. I mean, she just loved performing. She loved this town. As far as the flag, I have to disagree with you, Aaron. I think we have to look at the history of this town. And the ship Connor, which I think was built here down by Hamilton Seine Loft in that particular yard, has long been an emblem. I think it's on your paper right now. Is that it over there? No, that's not it. Is that Connor? I don't have one.
On the museum and the street sign, the emblem that's above, we had to have an official emblem for the museum and the street, so we did use the Connor in that.
Yeah.
And that, in fact, that's the phrase around the ring of that was the committee I think your mother was on that came up for our gateway signs, and so that's a theme.
Karen, just to let you know what I'm thinking here is that I think we should give to the fifth graders with some criteria, and one of those criteria would be it has to include like that symbol, and it has to include, you know, if we have an official town motto, maybe include something like that. But the actual design, I want to see what they can come up with, but I think it should have certain basic things in it like that. So that's what I was thinking.
It needs to be about Searsport, where we've come from.
I don't want to just be blank slate.
Yeah.
These are the things that should have.
Yeah.
I'm not going to consider a flag, or the town shouldn't consider a flag that doesn't have our seal in it. I think basic things like that.
So I would like to look into this copyright business if I can have your permission, or somebody can do
That's
it
fine.
for
I
me.
think we can. I think technically speaking, we can adopt any song we want. The issue with copyrights is when you start performing.
The
them.
words are different.
Right.
I mean, there's a few that are similar.
We can adopt. I think we can adopt any song we want. That's our song. We adopt it. Whether or not it can be, whether or not it's going to. Exactly. Right, we're not, whether or
And
not it's
also,
performed
as
is
far as the
different.
town motto, I think that they had a contest several years ago, and they came up on either side of town, there's a plaque welcoming to Searsport, and it's got a motto that was adopted.
Right.
And I don't remember what year that was, but it certainly suffices.
It's on our website. It's
Charting our future or
Yeah,
something.
you speaking about ones on the gateway, right?
Yeah, well, the one that's over by
Yeah,
where the old
I think it
red
was around
tower-
2000.
Pardon me?
I think that was around 2000.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, Governor Baldacci brought that program in when he was in his first term.
But they had a big contest, and they asked
Yep.
everybody to
Yep.
come
Yeah,
up
we
with
had a
something,
committee.
and they came up with that. I thought it was perfectly appropriate, so.
Well, I would suggest we deal with the song issue later and take a look at that. But Karen, do you have any major heartburn about the idea of the fifth graders doing it as long as there's like clear criteria?
As long as it has to do with the history of
Right.
Searsport.
So we want to see certain things in it, and then they can use their imagination and come up with something we like. I mean, obviously, it would be either a selectman's choice or a town meeting kind of vote, or
They could possibly come up with more than one, and
Yeah, I wanna
a
see a bunch.
selection could be made, or it could be voted on at town
we do
meeting.
it like a contest.
Well, why couldn't we,
Dick, go ahead, Dick.
The fifth graders consist of Searsport and Stockton. Okay, I'm just saying it.
I'm not going to have heartburn with it.
Okay.
why couldn't we sponsor some kind of a contest?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
You know, we can come up with basic criteria. We'd like to maybe see the motto in it, and the town seal, and then let them and we want it to represent the history and future of the town at the same time, or a flag that embodies the town motto, which basically covers that, and then see what they come up. I don't want to form another committee over it, nor do I want to serve on it, or appoint members, or review it. I think we had the fifth graders here, I think, and it was mentioned at that meeting, so I think it would be appropriate to maybe see if they can come up with some, and the teacher wants to give them extra credit, however he wants to handle it, and maybe we could take it up in March. That's just my idea. The song might that might take a little more work to determine what we can and can't do. But you sound like you might be willing to do some of the work for us.
I'd like to find out if we've been violating copyright laws.
If
but-
you want to know about copyright, I'd say check with George Kerper. He's the one that has found information that we should be aware of.
Yeah, I'll talk with him. I'm sure he'll help me. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if it requires a vote, but does,
Table it?
I think that the song issue should probably be tabled at least indefinitely at this point, because give you some time. The flag issue, is there any objection to the approach I put out there? Besides the town seal and the motto, is there any other criteria that we'd like?
I think to say it has to have the motto, it has to have the seal, it has to have this or that, we might give them a list of suggested things that might be on it and leave it up to them to combine them or do them
Some
and be creative with it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so guidelines.
When you start putting too much on a flag,
Yeah.
you start losing.
Yeah, so if we take it
You
over
can't-
completely, it's
I
no
mean,
magic.
somebody'd have to stop and look at it. It could not be in a car passing by, figure it out. What's all them words on there? So you got to be very selective and hit the bullets.
Okay, so guidelines, town, and these are just guidelines. The town seal, the town motto.
Town's past and town's future.
Yep, and date of incorporation should probably be on there. James, is someone taking this down? There's some good stuff here.
Color.
Yep, everything on it should have some sort of meaning. That's kind of a guideline for a flag. So there shouldn't be anything on it that's kind of random. It should have some sort of meaning related to the history/future of the town.
Dick, some of the flag companies you deal with, can they mock these up so you can see what you might have before you buy it?
You actually design this? and
Yes,
they-
you got it. You design what you want. I'll send it into them. They'll come back with how it looks as a flag.
So we want to see what the fifth graders can maybe come up with, maybe hold a contest and give us a bunch of ideas for the town meeting,
Come up with probably 2 final ones.
however the teacher wants to handle it, I don't know. I'd like to be able to have, I don't know if it needs to be on the warrant exactly, but at least, the final 3 candidates at the town meeting, and maybe people can kind of just choose.
Yeah.
Like an unofficial straw. Yeah. No, I think we can do I'd like to do the flag at this town meeting. Between now and then, if they come up with maybe 3 candidates, or they come up with a whole bunch of them and we choose the 3, maybe that's a better way to do it. We just kind of sit through and we choose the top 3, and then we bring it to town meeting unofficially, put it somewhere in the school, and people can kind of cast a little vote to see which one they like and go from there. That sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. All right. I don't think we need a vote. I think everyone's kind of on the same page here. Sounds like fun. 10B, disposition of old cruiser. This is the one that we gave to the ambulance director.
Correct, and we're looking to dispose of it, looking for permission from the board to dispose of it. The last cruiser we sent out, we sold to a cab company. Got 3 times the value or 3 times the amount of what we put them out to bid. I would look for permission from the board to sell it outright for no less than $2,000, or if that's unsuccessful, to put it out to bid.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Dick and Doug. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? 5-0. 11th hour, James, you mentioned some furnace issues at the library.
Yeah, we have discovered that the heat exchanger in the furnace at the library has some cracks. It is spewing out a bit of a smell and should be dealt with before it becomes a problem with the collections. And we went out and got a bid from our furnace guy that knows the furnace. He does report back to me that in changing the heat exchanger, the other components within the furnace are in very good shape and will last us a good long time. And another good piece of news is our chimney is lined, so we don't have to deal with any problems with that. He gave me 2 ideas to replace the heat exchanger. This is freight, labor, and miscellaneous parts is $2,262.94. And if we decided it would be better to replace the entire furnace, it would be $3,889.93. That's all included. We do have funds in our library reserve. Beginning of the year, we started out with somewhere in the neighborhood of $22,000. We did spend money on repairing the rear steps to the tune of under $5,000. There's plenty of money in the account to initiate the repair as soon as possible.
All right, is there a motion or any questions?
The question is whether or not we're going to replace the whole furnace and just replace the part. If the whole furnace were replaced, would the new furnace be more efficient? Or, because if it's not, there doesn't seem any point in replacing the whole thing.
It's the same technology. It would, in essence, be the same furnace as what was explained to me. There's no efficiencies built into it. It's an oil burner furnace. It's got a gun. It would basically be the same furnace in replacement.
You and I talked briefly about this. And I was in favor of a cast iron one simply because of retaining the heat on a cold nights. Do you know what is in the furnace that we're...
I wasn't able to get an answer to that before this meeting. I can explore that. I believe it was a pretty top-of-the-line furnace in there, but I don't know if it's cast or not.
All right. Anyone want to make a motion for one or the other?
I'd like to make a motion that we authorize the replace of the heat exchanger for $1,262.94. Oh, plus freight.
$2262.94.
$22.62. Plus labor, et cetera.
Is that from the library reserve?
Yes.
Okay, I'll second that. Discussion?
I think either one of them will give us many years of service.
All those in favor? 5-0, thank you. Correspondence, James?
I have a couple of items that have come in. First is a thank you from the Swan Lake Association for our contribution to their efforts to fight milfoil from town meeting. Second item is from the Maine Community Foundation, and they are, I guess, making a recommendation or asking if the board would be interested in turning some funds over to the Good Shepherd Food Bank for their stewardship. And if you want, we can talk about that in our budget cycle. The Friends of Sierras Island has sent a letter asking if we would help them with cutting back brush on the Jetty Road. And again, it's probably something that we would talk to during the budget cycle. And finally is the official letter from Bob Bouchard, our employee at the wastewater treatment plant, who will unfortunately be retiring. Fortunate for him, unfortunate for us. He'll be retiring, and that's his official notice.
Treasurer's warrant, I'll move we approve that pending signatures.
Second.
All those in favor of that? 5-0. Department head reports, James, I think we have them all. Am I missing anything?
Only missing the fire department. He'll have it tomorrow.
I'll move we approve those.
Second.
Discussion, questions? All those in favor? 5-0. Selectmen's reports, Jack, start us off.
I just want to say the village cemetery up there looked real good Saturday. Apparently, Public Works gone up, done some cleanup. So it looked real good for this time of year. So, well done, town crew.
Thank you. Meredith? I think I want to remind everybody on the board that we do have a workshop this Thursday at 6:30. Be downstairs. Doug?
Nothing.
Dick?
The fire department had their, Santa visited the fire department last Sunday, and people that came in there brought toys with them and everything, and the fire department was very pleased with the number of people that came in and the toys that were collected. Is the largest, I think, that they've ever collected. Very good support for the program, and those toys were taken later in the day over to wherever Wings of Love is, and they'll be given to children in Waldo County.
Thank you, Dick. All right, open to the public. Any phone calls? No? Yes. Open to the public. Second time around. Ann, come up.
Ann Cremato, Searsport. There are a lot of pressing issues facing the town, so please excuse me if I can't get too excited about a song. There are things that are really serious that we have to be spending some time on. One of the things I'd like to bring to your attention, I mentioned this to the planning board last night, and I don't want you guys to feel left out, so I'm going to talk about it here. If you've been following the papers, you'll see that Rockland has been struggling with an issue concerning Airbnbs. You all know what Airbnbs are? It's a short-term rental. Any of us right now can rent our homes. That's not a problem. What's happening in Rockland is that someone owns a piece of property, has a home, and they rent it out for short terms, 3 days, a weekend, a week, and there's no homeowner on the premises, and there's nothing to protect neighbors or the town from anything maybe untowards happening. It seems like we're not having a problem here. It seems like maybe this is something that we want to get ahead of, that we want to look into this. Rockland was having a public hearing, I believe, last night, because they've had some problems and they've had a lot of complaints. Maybe this is something that you guys want to just take a look at, think about, and see if there's something that we can do before it becomes a problem. Maybe it won't, but I know, Aaron, that you had done some stuff with marijuana dispensaries and so on and so forth before we had to deal with the issue. Sometimes it makes more sense to look ahead and say, this is a possibility. I mean, Airbnbs are a real thing, and they're becoming more and more of a real thing. So maybe we could just give it some thought and see if there's anything that we can do to head off problems. I don't know what that would be. I don't know that much about the issue other than what I've been reading. But if Rockland is having this problem, we could be faced with it, and maybe we need to think about, is there something we can do to prevent problems and don't have to wait till we start getting complaints and unhappy people. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Meredith, you have a question on it?
Yeah, I had a comment to make on that, Ann. I don't know very much about this. The first time I heard of it was when you mentioned it last night at the planning board meeting. It seems like it's going to be a kind of a narrow, a kind of a sticky wicket to try to navigate between the right of homeowners to rent their places out, because a lot of summer rentals are short-term. People rent it for, or will rent a property for a short time, and the proprietor, the owner, is not there. So it would be interesting to know what other towns are doing to address that, because that just looks like a very, very dicey thing to deal with. I mean, it does have to be dealt with, but I can't imagine how you'd do it. No.
Well, I don't know if it has to be dealt with. The question is, does it have to be dealt with? And right, I'm pretty familiar with it, and I'm curious as to what the real problems are. Are you able? Would you mind coming back up to the microphone? What are some of the problems that Rockland is facing with this? That's what I'm unclear about. What are some of the real issues that happen?
From what I understand, that they've had a lot of neighbors complaining, parties and things like this. And again, no one on the premises. Now, yeah, we have summer rentals, but there's generally no problems with someone renting a house for a week or a month or whatever. And, whether it's a family or it's a couple or whatever. But some of these other situations seem to be more like party situations, and some destruction, some noise.
So what kind of regulations is Rockland considering to address that?
I don't know. All I know is that there was going to be a public hearing. I'd be interested in finding out what happened, whether they have any solution. As I said, I don't know if it's a problem for us or it's not, but I think we could think about it and see what other towns.
I've heard rumors about it, but no real town kind of tackling it Because it
Right.
does impede on people's ability to rent their property.
Yeah, and
for-
and
especially
Meredith
in
is
a
right. I mean,
coastal
it's,
town.
you know, property owners certainly have rights. And you have to be careful that you're telling people you can't do this in your own home, or you can't, we can all rent out our homes. But maybe there could be some parameters. I mean, we got noise ordinances. You know, we have things in place now that might be sufficient. I don't know.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Bringing it up.
Appreciate it. Any other open to the public? Before we have executive session. Steve?
Just to follow up, we did have experience on the west side with an Airbnb last year. And maybe one solution, simple solution, it was around midnight, and from here to Moose Point, we were able to hear the beautiful band, nice bowed bass, but around midnight it was getting quite wearing. So police came down to the campground, and we called, and other people were calling, we couldn't find out where it was. We tracked it down. It was a rented house with no supervision, and it was an all-night wedding party with no parameters. So maybe just like when you have a flea market in front of your house or tag sale, you would have a permit, and at least everybody would know where it's going on in case there are problems, and the police could find it, the fire department, those sorts of things. Maybe a simple solution. Thank you.
All right. Any other open to the public? Suzanne, come on.
Hi, Suzanne Farley. Regarding the Airbnb, I've used them before. I like them. I'm actually quite a fan of them. But what I've seen communities doing in the, across the country, it becomes a business issue, actually, because people who are involved with Airbnb are actually making quite a bit of money on it, and it's a threat and a risk to legitimate businesses like bed and breakfasts. And so it's unfair competition. They're able to earn income without paying appropriate taxes on it because it's not recognized. So what a lot of communities that are concerned about this are doing are tackling it from that sort of ordinance perspective. So that's what I know about Airbnb. The other thing I wanted to comment on is it felt a little bit like being in the twilight zone in here tonight, because you had a really good turnout of people in your community who cared about a very important issue to them. You had a select person who spent a lot of time talking about the concerns of the people and offering what I thought was a legitimate solution. At least she was putting a solution on the table to try and address the people's concerns. You have a lot of people in this room that showed up because they care about an issue. And, you know, with one sweep of a vote, you know, Mr. Damaris makes a statement about he wants nothing to do with testing samples, but you don't give any explanation why. It sounds like, Dick, I don't want you to comment right now, but it sounds like you just made it just feels very, you know, shut the people down. I don't care what the people think. I'm not up here to serve the people. I'm up here to serve organizations that want to come to this town. It doesn't feel like you're serving the people. And when, Mr. Norman, you don't even offer up a reason for why, neither do you, Mr. Merrithew. This is an important issue, and you don't even offer up your opinions. And then we get to the next topic on the agenda, and chatter, chatter, chatter. Oh, let's talk about the flag for the town. And there's so much enthusiasm for it. I got to tell you, it felt like the Twilight Zone in here. That's my statement.
Okay, Suzanne, can I ask you a question? Well, can I just make a statement on the B&B? To me, it sounds like, I don't know the difference between renting out your property, an absentee landlord's role, versus the B&B thing. I assume the landlord somewhere, the owner is renting it out, whether it's for a week or whether they're giving them a year. You can get the wrong people in there and have parties every weekend. And I don't really see the difference between them two.
All I know is what I've read in other communities across the country that have concerns about them. How this town decides to approach it will be up to the town next soon.
Okay. You want me to comment on the other part of what you said? Okay. I do not want to see this town be responsible for testing, because there are outside agencies, let them do it. I don't want to see us pay for it and find someone to do the testing in the name of the town and then we end up in court because they've done their own testing and it says this when you say that. I don't want to go down that road.
Suzanne, we're not gonna be
I
going.
just want to continue this, please, Aaron.
Let me say this.
So,
You say
but,
what you- Wait, please, when you finish off what you say, I'm not going to respond to it, so
that's
just say what
fine.
you say.
My point that I'd like to have on the public record is that way back, if we look at an example with GAC, when we wanted to collect samples, the town said, no, you have to have an official source. The source that was presented wasn't good enough. And so, the town went ahead and hired somebody to look at GAC, and lo and behold, they needed to clean up the site. And yet, we're willing to let this company say that, oh, we'll go get our sample and we'll deliver it to the DEP. Come on, why is that any different? They could be just as looking for the clean water sample and taking it down. It's like taking a P-test with nobody looking. Why don't we have independent monitoring to protect our town from very serious chemicals? And I know you're not going to answer that, but that is the thing that I think is driving a lot of people what's on a lot of people's mind, and I think it's important.
Doug?
And I know that you guys are here to serve the people, and I just can't understand why again and again you have people come out and they speak to you and you defy their wishes. It just blows my mind.
Doug, go ahead.
Well, there's more people in Searsport than in this room, by the way. And I'll be happy to respond and why I don't agree with that. I think there's a big question of if the board has authority to make them do that, and whether we have purview over it. It's the purview of the DEP, in my mind, unless somebody can prove me differently.
Okay. Go ahead.
I guess I don't understand why the suggestion I made about independent testing isn't even worth considering or looking into to see if you have that right. And we're not talking about leading into court cases and confrontation, but we are talking about respecting legitimate concerns and, at the very least, verifying the standards that they themselves are claiming to achieve. It's right, it would solve a lot of issues. Maybe we can't do that, but maybe we can. Maybe it's something that could have been received with a little more, what's the word I want? Grace, for want of a better word, and with consideration. I think it's a valid suggestion, and I agree with Suzanne that people frequently feel that coming out, making the effort to speak and share what their concerns are can be easily and without explanation dismissed. Thank you.
Doug,
James, can you check on the legality of the board acting on something like that?
Could I just make a comment on that? I had not suggested that the board take any legal action. I had requested of the applicant that we might come to a voluntary agreement. There wouldn't be any legal action, just a voluntary agreement to allay the fears of some of the people in town, just to take some of that untrustfulness out of the air so everybody could feel confident that things are being done in the best interest of the town. I wasn't looking for any legal. In a small town like this, there should be enough neighborliness among the people who live and use this town that we should be able to agree with each other, to be cooperative, and to be hospitable to each other. And that was simply all I was asking.
Yes, Harlan. Oh, Jack, did you have something to say? Jack.
Yeah, we have several junkyards here in town we have permitted. None of them have been required to do any more than what's in the ordinance. And I don't think that it is good to have a set of double standards.
Harlan, is this about the Grimmel thing that you've spoken about 3 times? Okay, if there's something else coming up. Please come on up.
My name is Harlan McClellan, and I'm here to ask you about the question I asked you last time we were here. For a long time, justifiably, no one came to any of the meetings we had in town. No one showed up for anything. The same people did everything all the time. So there wasn't a lot of emphasis put on what is about the public's convenience, the public's interest, trying to reach the public. There wasn't much in there. There wasn't any reason to be. The public didn't care. Times have changed. The public cares. You can see that. Everybody can see that. I'm sure that when I went to school, they taught you that if you're dealing with the public and you're running some kind of a program, whether it be a school or a town or a prison or whatever the hell it is, you really need to get the public involved as much as possible if you want to succeed. Let them know what you're doing, get their information, get their input, and then make your decisions and let them know. Communications is the key to success for all of these things. I'm sure James will back me up on that. Do they teach you that, James? That you should get the public as involved as possible? They do, of course. Okay, a given. My request was to get the public more involved. Well, you can see from, it's not just me, but other people feel like involving the public is something we don't really want to do if we don't have to. And that makes people that do want to get involved sometimes intimidated, sometimes irritated. But I think that we should do everything we can to ask people what they think. When we come here to meetings, if the goal is to have people show up at the meetings, and I think it is, when we get to the meetings, allow us to take part. You do a magnificent job, much better than ever before, but I think we can open it up a little bit more, and I talked to you about when people come and make a presentation to the board, consider it a presentation to the room and allow the public to ask questions. I don't think you'll run into a lot of problems there. I really don't anticipate any. And I asked you to let me know at the next meeting if this is something that you could consider. If not, why not? And I'm wondering kind of what the results of that was before we go on.
Yeah, I remember you bringing that up. I'm going to try to answer your question the best I can, and it's almost 9 o'clock, so if I get snarky, that's why, okay? And it struck me when you asked it, and as I've thought about it, that only in Searsport, where we have 2 open to the publics, where you don't need to have any, we have open to the viewing public where someone can call in, where I rarely ever put any kind of time limit on how someone can talk. In a public hearing, people spoke 3 times.
Correct.
Multiple people.
Correct.
We have top of the line, as far as I know, webpage and community thing.
Don't know about that.
We have the TVs on right now. So people can have an idea what's happening, and then if they don't like it, they can call in. Would we then get a request that they basically want to be able to chime in at any point in our meeting? So no, I'm firmly against that.
And I don't think it's at any point of the meeting. I think I said when people make presentations, members of the public should be allowed to ask questions. And for you to say that we're not required to have any open to the public, maybe not in the law, but how about decency? How about in the sense of trying to get more people involved?
Does anyone on this board honestly think that we are being too closed off to the public and the amount of public input we take at our average meeting? Speak up now.
Well, what about what the people think? That's what counts. So people are what the people think is what's important. The board thinks represents what the
Harlan,
people. Anyway, you decided not to. Fine.
That's just my opinion, Harlan.
Okay, but that's your opinion is the town lawyer's opinion and the board's opinion, and that's the way it goes.
One of the privileges of being able to chime in.
No, that's not what I had in mind.
Or raise your hand, and ask a question. That's one of the privileges afforded to someone who runs for the position, gets elected.
Yeah.
Okay. Because then it's our meeting, and we can ask a question.
Yeah.
And so I would say if somebody really wants that privilege, they should take papers out and put themselves on the ballot.
Or you would think maybe the people on the board would know that they can't possibly ask all the relevant questions, and maybe somebody in the audience might have an answer. Enough of that. My second point, I don't want to alienate you guys. My second point is when Dick, when you say you don't want to get involved with any kind of testing, you're probably the only person in Searsport who doesn't think that the GAC cleanup is a good thing. If you remember back when we first presented this, your reaction was the same thing. No testing, it's not true, it's got to be a lie, the company never lies, no testing no matter what. Come to find out, we weren't kidding. The problems we identified, GAC identified. GAC volunteered to work on them. Don't you think that's a good thing that they're cleaning up the bay? And if you think it's a good thing that resulted from testing, how can you be against any testing, anytime, no matter what? It just doesn't seem to add up. It gives a real negative impression of your willingness to accept science, you know? I mean, testing is not a pro or a con thing.
Harlan.
You're getting tired of hearing me, right, guys? All right. I'm tired of hearing you, too. Really, I am. Voting through that, Douglas? Can't believe you did that.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for a chance to speak.
Ann, quickly, please. It's really late, please.
I'll be very brief. I know everybody wants to go home. I don't think anybody was talking about the selectmen going down and taking samples. I think what we were talking about, which is normal procedure, and James, you can jump in here if I'm incorrect, but the independent testing laboratory will take the samples. They will take the samples and then they will go and test them. So it's not like you're expecting the company to take the samples and give them to the testing laboratory. That's, you know, there's a little room there for...
But all I would say is what's normal is what the DEP regulations require. And so that, to me, that's the standard norm. So they're complying with DEP, and if DEP states
I don't see any reason why we can't do it that people are reassured.
I just want to establish what normal is here. Normal is them complying with DEP regulations. If people think that those regulations are open to mischief, that's a legitimate thing to bring up to them. But the conditions that the board imposed or reimposed on the applicant was to maintain that permit, which including all the permits of all the requirements that come with it, including testing and.
Well, some things are common sense. If you're doing random drug tests, you don't tell somebody, oh, bring in your sample from home and give it to us and we'll test it.
And I might personally agree with you, but that's not what DEP thinks.
Well,
so maybe they need to change it, but that's what they have set up right now.
Said what I have to say.
You know what? I'm gonna make a motion.
Yeah,
at
let
this
me
point.
just finish.
You know
okay?
what, Peter? I've heard enough.
Okay.
Tonight.
Okay. Well, I've heard enough of you too.
Yeah. I'm gonna make a motion to go.
You know, I will say something. I'd like you people to consider getting yourself a town attorney. We used to have one. Yeah. Now we have one who's self-appointed, and he bullies the rest of you by citing law. And when he doesn't like what he hears, whoop, he shuts you off.
Time at 9:48.
You're a disgrace, Aaron.
And if anyone disagrees with it, they can vote against it. And it's let me get this language right. Confidential records to discuss general assistance matter.
Which is shameful for
enough. Be quiet.
Fuck you.
Jeez. Labor negotiations, contracts, and personnel matter. Is there a second? Thank you. All those in favor?